I'm sure the Buckingham Palace invitations were in the pile, and he collected everything, including which were a whole load of papers of issues that he dealt with. So that bit we know, and we know that a lot of boxes were transferred to Mar-a-Lago. That bit is easy. The question is, what was classified? What was authorised? Was he just too lazy about all of this?
Well, Nigel, let me just begin by saying one thing and making absolutely clear. President Trump's mistake wasn't collecting all this information, as you said, or these documents. It was not endorsing me in a Senate primary when I was running for the Senate. So just so you know, it's not like I'm, here to carry his water. But as a former federal prosecutor, a couple things really stuck out at me. As Rudy mentioned, you've mentioned that all former presidents have a bunch of documents, and they're classified, and then they go through this process.
They write their memoirs.
Right, and not only that, any president can declassify anything they want. And so the president has a lot of authority to actually have these documents and declassify these documents.
I understand that. The president has the power to declassify the documents. My question, again, is, was he just too lazy? Did he declassify these documents or didn't he? Because it's very unclear to me.
Yeah, well, and that's part of this is going to what's going to have to come out is the defense. Exactly what he did, when he did it. But the reality is look, I mean, in the Western world, we talk about the rule of law. We talk about consistency, equal application of the law. And the reality is that what President Trump did when these charges related to handling the documents and obstruction of justice, I mean, you have Hillary Clinton literally destroying servers and documents.
And this is the charge. This is the charge that on her own private server, there were tens of thousands of documents.
Right.
And when she was hauled over the coals, the accusation is that she cleared the documents before giving the laptop to the FBI, which raises a question. 2016 campaign, I was there in some of the crowds, lock her up, lock her up. But Trump never prosecuted it, did he?
Yeah, no, he didn't. And, look, I mean, a lot of times there's politicians say something, right? The old saying that politicians' lips are moving, they must be lying kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I wasn't trying to be dodgy with your question, but I keep coming back to, in a lot of ways, it doesn't matter whether those documents were classified or unclassified because we know former presidents retain those documents, they have them. We know that other people have those documents. And one thing that I keep thinking of is a former president, President Trump still has Secret Service protection. Hillary Clinton didn't when she was destroying the server and she was running for president. Joe Biden in his haphazard garage, that wasn't being protected by U.S. law enforcement officials. And so, in many ways...
But the accusation here, and photographs appeared in the press over the weekend, even before the court case, which I thought was interesting, of documents in the ballroom at Mar-a-Lago, documents in a bathroom at Mar-a-Lago. I mean, the accusation is that Trump had this stuff laying around all over the place. I find it hard to believe, but that's what they're saying.
Yeah, well, and once again, I was a federal prosecutor, I was a state prosecutor. I do not recall ever in my career ever seeing an indictment with actual photographs. And I think that that's designed to poison the jury pool, inflame the public, get all these media stories out there. So this indictment, you've got a copy of it, was, I think, largely written for public consumption. And that's why there's some of those juicy anecdotes in there. And I'm sure there's some prosecutors and left-leaning, Praetorian Guard, FBI agents that were sitting around laughing, going, we're going to use Trump's very own statements from the campaign trail against him. But the notion that you put these photographs in there, that is not necessary.
I did find that, and the fact that it went to the press over the weekend. One of the things this document does say is that there were 6 documents marked top secret that the prosecution claim had not been declassified, and we'll find out more as this develops. But the biggest accusation here, I think, or one of the biggest, is that he showed these documents to people who visited him at Mar-a-Lago saying this is secret. And that's why they're claiming, under the Espionage Act, he's shown people papers that involved American defense, American nuclear capability. It's a very serious charge.
Right. And once again, to put this in context, when that conversation allegedly occurred, we weren't there. We don't know if he just waved a piece of paper. And ironically, if they're going to use President Trump's language from speeches and everything else, we know that he is given to exaggerate sometimes and a little hyperbole.
Really?
And so, yes. So how do we know exactly, what he held, what he had, what he showed them, what he didn't show them? But remember, to be convicted, and there's 31 counts of this, Nigel, each one of those counts, carries, double-digit years in prison. So you have to have an unauthorized possession. So if I were his defense attorney, I'd be like, no, he was the former president. There hadn't been a subpoena yet for these documents. He was authorized to have them. So the elements of that crime are you have to have an unauthorized possession of them. You have to have reason to believe that those documents could injure the United States or help a foreign adversary, and that you're willfully, essentially intentionally not delivering them. And so those are various elements you have to prove.
This is where the obstruction comes in. Because again, what the prosecutions say is when Biden was pulled up on this, when Pence was pulled up on this, they willingly surrendered the documents. And and this is what they say, that when Trump was pulled up on this, he surrendered some of the documents, but not all. So how do you disprove obstruction?
Yeah, and this actually, I think, is the most serious of all the charges, quite frankly, because in the past, the federal government, when they want to get you, they usually go with lying to the FBI or obstruction of justice. And so I think this is an issue that the Trump defense team is really going to have to address, because I do think this is one where they're going to have to explain what they did, why they did it, and maybe he thought he turned everything over. I don't know. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he genuinely believed all these were declassified and he didn't need to turn anything else over. So I don't know what his defenses are going to be, but at some point there will have to be some explanation.
Yeah, no, there will.
That is probably the most serious, toughest of the charges for me, point of view of a prosecutor. I will say, though, once again, this is what bothers me from a federal prosecutor. I think we are seeing the weaponization, and Rudy mentioned the fact that in third world countries this happens, and the reality is that they were supposedly investigating, what documents were turned over, not documents turned over, and you end up with these process crimes. Well, maybe you weren't truthful to the FBI, or maybe this happened, and once you start down that path, it is very easy for them, whenever the next party's in power, to do that. And so I think that we are seeing the beginning of an erosion of public confidence.
So the precedent's quite worrying in that sense.
Well, I think that Joe Biden should be worried, yes, because this is...
And Trump's already called it,
right, the Pandora's box. But, once again, as a prosecutor ethically, so this is, if I were part of his defense team, one is the way this was filed and with the photographs, I think it's borderline unethical what the prosecutors were doing with pretrial publicity and trying to, poison the jury pool. But the other part about it is that you're in this situation now where DOJ, when I was a prosecutor, we believed in what was called the rule of lenity. And that meant that if you were going to criminally charge someone for a crime, you construe criminal statutes narrowly and really, quite frankly, in favor of the defendant, because you have the power of the state. You have the power literally to destroy people's lives, take away their property, their liberty. And so that's an awesome responsibility. You should never, whether it's President Trump, President Biden, whoever it is, no one should ever be in a position where they're worried about their liberty because some prosecutor is throwing stuff against the wall,
I think
untested theories, something that's never been done in the United States.
This raises huge questions. Now, ultimately, this will go before a jury.
Yes.
In Florida.
Yeah.
How's it going to end?
I think it is going to be tough to convince 12 jurors in South Florida, especially people. There's a large Cuban American population down there that saw firsthand, Venezuelan population saw firsthand when you get a dictatorship or a government that weaponizes the Justice Department, weaponizes prosecutors, and federal law enforcement ends up becoming an arm of the Democratic Party. I think there are going to be a lot of people that are going to be resistant to that. And remember, United States, it has to be a unanimous jury.
Yeah.
So everyone has to agree. So all you need is one or two holdouts. And
it's going to be interesting. Mark Brnovich, thank you for being with me. And, I've done my best here to present the most serious charges of the prosecution and to get some answers and explanations. Is it a witch hunt? You bet your life it's a witch hunt. All he has to say is, I'm not running for president, and all these cases would simply disappear. But he's bigger and tougher than that, in my view.